So, what if intelligence isn't a cure for being stupid, but an accelerant? What if the smartest people walking among us are operating on a completely different psychological and, yeah, even a different physiological level? In this explainer, we're going to dive into a really fascinating discussion that's been making waves online, one that reframes intelligence not as some kind of virtue, but as a powerful and maybe even dangerous amplifier. And it all kicks off with this pretty brutal assessment. The whole idea starts from the premise that a lot of people are kind of like empty vessels, but not in the way you might think. For them, getting new knowledge doesn't lead to enlightenment. Nope. Instead, it just becomes more fuel for whatever dogma and biases they already have. They don't learn to be less wrong, they just learn how to be wrong with way more sophistication.
And that brings us to our first big idea: weaponized intelligence. This is what happens when new information, instead of correcting your false beliefs, just becomes ammunition. It's used to build higher, more complicated walls around a worldview that's already flawed to begin with.
This slide right here, this is the formula. Think about it. Someone with a really high verbal IQ can craft these incredibly elaborate, persuasive arguments. But if those arguments are built on a foundation of rigid, unbending ideology, all that brainpower just ends up producing a more devastatingly convincing kind of wrongness. It's convincing to other people, and, what's scarier, it's convincing to themselves. This is just the perfect way to put it. We're not just talking about people looking for info that confirms what they already believe. When you add high intelligence to the mix, they can build these intricate, fortress-like justifications that are almost impossible to break through with facts because they're just so good at twisting logic and evidence to fit their narrative. And look, this isn't just some random internet theory. There's a formal psychological term for it: motivated reasoning. And what's wild is that studies actually show that higher cognitive ability can increase polarization on controversial issues. It seems the smarter you are, the better you get at defending your tribe, not at finding some objective truth.
Okay, so if intelligence can be weaponized by individuals, what happens when you zoom out and look at the whole system? Well, this discussion suggests that the chaos we see all around us isn't an accident. It might actually be by design, orchestrated by something they call the apex mind.
Now, that is a truly chilling thought, right? The idea is that a very small number of ultra-intelligent, super powerful individuals, these apex players, they actually benefit from all the mass distraction, all the outrage cycles, the tribalism, the endless arguments online. They aren't failures of the system, they are the system. And it's working perfectly to keep the rest of us busy while the real players operate completely unopposed.
And these so-called apex players aren't all the same. The theory breaks them down into three main groups. First, you have your classic oligarchs, focused on extraction, just leeching wealth from the system as it is. Then you have the accelerationists, who basically want to burn it all down. And finally, you've got the transhumanists, who are focused on escaping human limits through tech. The crucial point is, their endgames might be different, but they're all using the same chaotic environment to get there.
And this analogy just nails the power gap. While most of us are arguing about the rules of the game, the developers, the apex minds, are busy rewriting the fundamental code of our reality, everything from finance and technology to geopolitics.
So let's actually go inside the minds of these people for a second. What is it really like to be one of these hyper-intelligent actors? The forum has a name for it, the High Sigma Curse, and it's a really deep dive into the psychology of extreme intelligence. All right, first, let's just get the terms straight. High Sigma, or High Sigma, is just shorthand for people way out at the far end of the intelligence spectrum. And we're not just talking about being smarter. It's a totally different way the brain processes reality, models systems, and sees patterns that nobody else does.
Now, this right here is a critical distinction. High Sigma people often have incredible cognitive empathy, meaning they can understand and predict what you're thinking with almost scary accuracy. But what often gets eroded is emotional empathy, the ability to actually feel what you're feeling. And when that happens, other people can stop being people, and they start looking more like predictable pieces on a chessboard.
And this leads to the curse. For a mind that literally cannot stop modeling everything, the world is, well, it's a painful place. Normal life is neurologically boring, understimulating. Inefficiency isn't just annoying, it's like nails on a chalkboard. And all of this creates this pathological need for control and optimization. Because for a brain like that, ambiguity is pure torture.
So we have this picture of a psychologically tortured genius, right? Cursed by their own amazing mind. But this is where the story takes a completely unexpected turn. Because when we look at the physical health of these individuals, that whole curse narrative, it seems to just vanish.
You would think a mind under that much stress would just wreck the body, right? Well, the data says something completely different. For example, high IQ individuals show no higher risk of diabetes. In fact, if anything, their risk is actually lower.
And it doesn't stop there. The protective effect is even stronger for heart health. Higher intelligence is consistently linked to a lower risk of cardiovascular disease. I mean, get this. Some studies have found that a low IQ is the second strongest predictor of dying from heart disease, right behind smoking. That is just astonishing.
This resilience seems to go all the way down to the biochemical level. Researchers have found no evidence of common enzyme problems or the kind of metabolic glitches you'd totally expect from a brain that's constantly running in overdrive.
And even something as common as chronic back pain is less likely in adults who had a higher childhood IQ. It seems that, against all odds, the body of a high sigma individual is a surprisingly resilient machine.
So, how do we square this? The tormented, cursed mind in this super resilient, protected body? Well, this brings us to the final unifying idea of this whole discussion.
The core argument is this. Intelligence isn't a measure of success or health or goodness. It's a psychometer. It's just a neutral, incredibly powerful amplifier. It takes whatever is already inside a person, their core values, their moral code, their traumas, and it just turns the volume all the way up.
This table lays it out perfectly. If a person's core is benevolent, high IQ makes them dangerously effective at doing good. They can solve huge systemic problems and change the world for the better. But if their core is malevolent, that exact same IQ creates a megalomaniac, someone capable of engineering chaos on a global scale.
So if intelligence is just this neutral amplifier, what's the counterforce? What stops raw, amoral calculation from taking over? The discussion suggests the answer is wisdom. Now, this quote is a little poetic, I know, but the core idea is that wisdom isn't about processing speed. It's about integrated understanding, it's about emotional empathy and humility, the very things that can keep that powerful, recursive mind in check.
And that right there is the ultimate takeaway. Intelligence provides the horsepower, the raw power to get somewhere fast, but it's morality, or wisdom if you like, that's actually holding the steering wheel. And without a driver, a powerful engine is just a chaotic force, accelerating toward whatever abyss the soul was already leaning into.
Which leaves us with this final and, I think, crucial question. In a world that's becoming more and more optimized for raw intelligence and processing power, how do we make sure that moral driver gets installed and stays in control before that high-performance engine takes us all right off a cliff?